the cost of living issue is one that hits women incredibly hard because women are the one out buying groceries, and they're seeing, like in my household, my wife runs my home, right? The females are the ones that are seeing the daily cost of living impact the greatest.
I'm a mom of three, a grandmother of seven, and three great-grands. So I know the cost that goes into raising children and running a household.
Yeah.
People just can't survive now. How are you going to bring down the cost of food and groceries?
We have to start always with energy. It's my ambition to get your energy bill within 12 months down 50%. If I can do that, you've done a hell of a job. 5-0, not 15, 50.
All right, guys, we are 4 weeks, almost 4 weeks out. Tomorrow will officially be 4 weeks into the election, 28 days to go. You know what? I just want to tell you something. I put my money where my mouth is. Friday, in between after the show, I went out and I voted. There's my ballot. See that, Donald J. Trump? There you go, Virginia. Get out there and vote. And I got my sticker. They told me this is a some kind of commemorative sticker. Look at that, 2024. I voted in the presidential election in Alexandria, Virginia. We've heard over and over again how important this is. It saves the campaign money. I voted in person. I went down right next to City Hall in Alexandria and I cast my vote in person. Do however you want, but it saves them time and money. We hear this over and over again. What was it the other day? $12 to chase you down, up to $100 if you wait. That could be spent on low propensity voters, so don't do that. That rally, by the way, Saturday that Trump had in Butler, wow. I mean, I've seen big rallies. That thing was amazing, and in a key battleground state. What a lineup they had. Opera singers, Elon Musk. I mean, it was quite the show. I think this is huge for him. Look at the people, though. I mean, it was unbelievable. Take a quick listen to some of that.
It is 6/11, 12 weeks to the minute that the shooting began. I would like to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence.
All right. Also, interestingly enough, a big contrast. Hillary Clinton, apparently, like this is it. This is the essence of them. Stop free speech. Stop us from discussing this. And take a listen. This is what she really wants. She wants them to stop being able to hear our side of the story. Take a listen.
If they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. And it's not just the social and psychological effects, it's real harm.
All right, guys, a lot to get into. Big show you're coming your way, by the way. Brent Buchanan, top pollster for Cygnal, is going to come on and share us brand new numbers. They are not even released yet. No one in the public has seen or heard Cygnal's brand new pollster. We're going to hear that. And then Wes Donehue, they're involved in races around the country, on Montana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. He is the president and founder of Push. He is going to be with us as well. Big show. Before I do that, though, I've told you all about the consequences of Democrats. They spend money, and then they hire IRS agents. Those IRS agents go out and try to get what they think that they can get out of you. Personal, business, it doesn't matter. 5,000, 50,000, 5 million. They're going to comb through your life. If they send you one of these, they call them pay up notices, which means we think you owe us money. And we're going to go through your entire life and dig through everything. It's a scary moment. And I'm going to tell you, it's the same thing as DOJ. When they come, you better have a good lawyer. Well, if the IRS comes, you better have a good tax professional. I think the best people in the business are the folks at Tax Network USA. And if you can give them a call, 1-800-245-6000. Better yet, go to TN, which is Tax Network, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. These guys have recovered over $1 billion for their clients, and they can help you. Do not try to face the IRS on your own if you get a pay-up notice, if they call you, knock on your door, whatever. Go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer and get the help from the best in the business. Do not go alone on this. All right. By the way, some show updates for you. Tomorrow, Robert Cahaly, we've been trying to get him. but he's been affected by some power internet issues. Tomorrow, he's going to be in a place that we're assured we will have him. So tomorrow, we're going to break down the latest Trafalgar polls, and we're going to find out where the race stands in the battleground states. We're going to do that today in just a moment with Brent Buchanan. They have brand new polling that has not been released to the public. You're going to get this first. Brent Buchanan are going to reveal on air where the race stands and what's driving it. What issues are moving this race? Where are the trends? So Cahaley tomorrow, Brent Buchanan and Wes Donehue coming right up. Road to 270 on Wednesday, which is huge because a lot of polling has come out. I'm going to include the Trafalgar polling, a lot of new data, where the race stands. I've shaded a lot of stuff, toss up, light blue, light red. I'm willing and I'm ready now to move some states. So mark that down on Wednesday. Hit the notification button now. But here's the big thing. Next Sunday night, it's Columbus Day weekend. Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern, we're going to have a live event. We're going to go through the states. But here's the big difference. We're bringing in experts from every key battleground state, and we're going to get their take. So you're not just going to hear me. You're going to hear the people on the ground in the states talking about data, early vote, absentee vote, registration vote in every one of these. This is something you will not see anywhere else. Trust me. We're probably going to go for at least an hour and a half. We're going to go state by state with the experts. Hit the notification button. Put it in your calendar now because you're not going to want to miss this. Kamala Harris is doing what I call a faux media tour right now. Yes, she's doing a thing called Call Her Daddy. She did that. By the way, I don't really want to get disgusting, but the Call Her Daddy podcast isn't exactly, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's good for it. It's very sexual in nature, what they talk about. I'll leave it at that. Ask Wes Donehue about this in just a minute. But this is where they think this is their wheelhouse. Really go for the women, juice them about abortion and some other disgusting stuff. But they knew what they were doing there. And this is where I think I'm going to ask Brent Buchanan about this. How much is abortion affecting the race? I think you're going to be surprised. They've got brand new numbers out on this. And then she did this taped interview on 60 Minutes. I'll give her credit for that. That comes out. I think they play that tonight. Tuesday, she's going to be on The View, and then she's going on Howard Stern and Colbert. I mean, come on. A media blitz? Really? I'm not really sure that qualifies. I mean, this Call Her Daddy thing is frankly rather disgusting. Waltz was on Shannon Dream on Fox, and it was pretty unbelievable. He denied being she was asked specifically about his misstatements. I want to play that for you here.
Being in Hong Kong and China in the summer of 1989 during the Tiananmen events, a lot of people would say they couldn't get away with saying, I'm just too passionate, my grammar's not right, I'm a knucklehead. What do you say to the American people who think, I don't know that I can trust this guy with all those modifications to be the potential commander-in-chief of this country?
Yeah, well, I think they heard me. They heard me the other night speaking passionately about gun violence and misspeaking. And I got to be honest with you, Shannon, I don't think people care whether I used IUI or IVF when we talk about this. What they understand is Donald Trump would resist those things. Look, I speak passionately. I had an entire career, decades before I was in public office. They know, and I'm very proud of my 24 years in service and my record. I have never disparaged someone else in this, but I know that's not what Donald Trump does. They disparage everyone, the personal attacks. I will own up when I misspeak. I will own up when I make a mistake. Let's be very clear. On that debate stage the other night, I asked one very simple question, and Senator Vance would not acknowledge that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. I think they're probably far more concerned with that than my wife and I used IUI to have our child, and that Donald Trump would restrict that. So I think folks know who I am. My constituents here in Minnesota have elected me 8 times. They know where I'm at, and I'm proud to be on the ticket, and we'll deliver just like we have here in Minnesota.
Right. And if we're going to deal in truth, both the president, the former president, and his nominee have said that they are very supportive of IVF. We are glad you have your precious family. We thank you for serving in uniform and your years and decades as a teacher. My mom was too. I know it's really hard work and sometimes very thankless. So, Governor, we appreciate your time.
Okay. I mean, she cornered him on everything. Good job to Shannon on calling him out on all of his misdeeds. And he's just, oh, I misspoke again. And Donald Trump pivot. You know what? You're a pathological liar. That's what you are. And if it mattered more, we'd be talking more about it, but we don't, because I think we have a bigger fish to fry. All right. As I said, coming right up, Brent Buchanan, brand new numbers from Cygnal polling. You need to see this. You're not going to see it anywhere else because it hasn't been given out anywhere else, exclusive to us. Then when he's done, Wes Donehue of Push Digital, they're playing in major states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, He's going to tell us what he thinks about the messaging, where it's going, how the ground game is. A lot to get to with him. All right, before I bring in Brent, I want to tell you about something that's changed my life. I've always had trouble sleeping, staying asleep. I started taking Beam, their dream powder, before I go to bed. I've told you about this before. Folks, if you are taking melatonin or magnesium or reishi or apigen or any of this stuff, all of that comes together. So it's all natural. It's taken by athletes and professionals. It's put in this amazing blend. And I say amazing, when you try it, you're going to go, I get what Sean was talking about. Like, I could sip this stuff all day long. It's that good. It tastes like hot cocoa. With this one's the cinnamon. I alternate now between the cinnamon and the brownie because I don't want to play favorites. They're both unbelievable. I put 1 scoop in some water, stir it around, put it in the microwave for 30 minutes before I go to bed. And when that head hits the pillow, bye-bye. You're out. And you wake up feeling refreshed because it's all natural. But it's everything that you've taken before in 1 scoop that tastes delicious. So go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code Spicer at the checkout to save up to 40% off. That's shopbeam.com. Use code word Spicer for 40%. I'm telling you, you try this once and you're going to go, now I get what Sean was talking about. If you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, game changer. All right, without further ado, the president of Cygnal polling with brand new exclusive data just for us, Mr. Brent Buchanan. Brent, thanks for coming back. Always appreciate your insights.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to be here.
All right, so give me a lay of the land. Where is the race right now? Where are the trends going in? What direction are the trends going in?
I would say that nationally, Kamala Harris's Vibes campaign has been working for her. There's a reason that she's stayed out of the media spotlight and just let this massive amount of paid advertising carry the weight for her, because we show her currently ahead by 3 points nationally. But I do want to temper that with the fact that Biden was only ahead by a little over 4 at this point. Actually, he was ahead further at this point, but by election day was only ahead a little over 4 points nationally. And
so wait, can I hammer that? Because I know that a lot of folks, they keep saying that, like, look, in 2016, Hillary was up by like 6 points. At this point, Biden was up by 4. And to your point, if she's only up by 3, isn't that good news for Trump?
It is. I think it also shows a really tight race, though. And you can really go back and look at 2022 national polling that would have said we would have had a red wave with Republicans showing an advantage on the generic ballot nationally. And I think what's happened with the hyperpolarization and really COVID has moved people around. And so you have states like Florida that have over 1 million more registered voters in this election than they did in the 2020 election. And so people have self-selected where they're going to live because of COVID. And I think that's one of the underreported facts of this election compared to 2020 is where have people moved from and to, and how is that really affecting what's happening? And then you go look at a state like Pennsylvania that not a whole lot of people moved to and not a whole lot of people moved away from during the pandemic. And I think that's why you see this really, really tight race within Pennsylvania.
But in Pennsylvania, the registration, and we've shown this, if you look at where it was in 2016, 2020, Republicans have just done phenomenal closing that registration gap by over 600,000 voters. So if no one's moved, i.e. in or out of state for the most part, then that really suggests that Democrats are losing market share and Republicans are gaining it, which should be good news.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd rather have that trend than the other way in a state like Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania also has probably one of the lowest shares of unaffiliated or non-party affiliated voters of any states in the country. And so as we've seen this educational attainment shift where folks without college degrees are becoming more Republican and those with college degrees are becoming more Democrat, I think some of what we're seeing there is this shift of people who have been voting Republican that are now putting it on their card. But I think that's one of the reasons that this race is so close within Pennsylvania is that massive push for voter registration within the state. And so now becomes the hard part is capitalizing on how do we get those people to show up. And I recently read an article this weekend of how the Trump campaign, but really its affiliates through Charlie Kirk's organization and Elon Musk PAC, of how they're focusing on these low propensity voters, folks who don't really show up in elections. And I think that if or when we pull this across the line, that is solely going to be the reason why we did so, because elections are no longer about persuasion. They're about persuasion to turn out.
So how do you as a pollster take that into consideration? Because history suggests that Bobby, who just registered to vote, we don't know if he's going to vote. So how do you include him in a poll or not, or, her for that matter?
Yeah, that's the challenge, is that humans really suck at projecting their future behavior, but they're really good at living up to or being truthful with their past behavior. And when you've got what we call a 0 of 4 voters, they have voted in 0 of the last 4 similar elections. We only have to go off of what they're telling us they're going to do, because there's no history in that. And I've seen different studies that show that people who register to vote are actually more likely to actually show up to vote, but then they fall off after that first election where they registered to vote. But this is why it's so important that Republicans go vote early, that if they have the opportunity, that they get an absentee ballot and return that by mail, or put it in a drop box, or if they have an opportunity to go vote early. Because what most voters don't realize is that campaigns are pushing towards a vote goal. And they're expending resources to make sure they hit certain vote goals within certain states and certain parts of the state. And if Republican voters wait to vote, they're going to continue expending resource on those Republican voters. And if you go ahead as a Republican voter and return your ballot early, then you are taken off that list. So one, you quit getting all the text messages and mailers and digital ads. But two, we can then take those resources and put them on these 0 for brand new Republican voters to make sure that they turn up to vote, because it takes a whole lot more touches because they don't have that history of voting.
There's a story out in the New York Times this morning that says how one polling decision is leading 2 distinct stories of the election. Let me just kind of read you the key takeaway. It says, this is from their author there, Nate Cohen. It says, this divide is almost entirely explained by whether a pollster uses waiting on recalled vote, which means trying to account for how voters they say voted in the last election. Meaning, I ask you, in the last election, did you vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden? And that's how they base a lot of their weighting. Do you guys do that or not?
We do, and I would say that most every private pollster does weight to what we call the retro or the recall ballot of how did these folks who responded vote in the prior election. Now, what is not included in that number is who voted for another candidate in that election and who has not voted and did not vote in 2020, but they're telling us they're voting in this election. So I disagree with the whole premise of that article, in that you can't just
really?
say...
Wait, you disagree with the New York Times? Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to, but there is a large swath of voters that did vote for somebody else in 2020, or they didn't vote in 2020 at all. And so it is helpful to be able to control for that factor, because one thing that happens in surveys of all sorts, almost regardless of what mode you're using to collect somebody's response, is that the events of the day or the week do drive over response and under response of certain voter groups. So if you go back and look at right after the disastrous debate for Biden against Donald Trump, you saw a huge drop off in Democrats responding to surveys, and about the same amount of Republicans continued to respond to surveys. So you saw this delta created of in the end polling results that showed that Biden was just getting absolutely waxed. And while I do believe that he was losing, it wasn't the fact that he was going to be completely waxed at that point in the election. And that was because of Democrat under response. And now with Kamala being swapped out, what you see in polling is an over response of Democrats in most places. It's not in every state. So for example, in Pennsylvania, we see it a whole lot more than we see with voters in Georgia, where you've got older, more liberal white women responding at higher rates to surveys in Pennsylvania. But that doesn't necessarily exist, the exact same trend in Georgia. But you have to control for both that recall vote that you're talking about in this article, but also making sure that you're not under or over, taking too much weight in that under or over response of voters based on what's happening in the political environment.
Jeez. Wow, it's actually a little bit of a science there. All right, you mentioned this new poll that you guys have. You're going to be bringing it out tomorrow. Shows her up 3 nationally. I know we don't vote nationally, and this is more of a look at trends. What are you seeing under the hood, though? Where is the movement? Where is the trend coming from?
Well, a lot of it is to be expected is with female voters, and especially female voters under the age of 55. That was a group that was very low from a ballot share perspective when Joe Biden was the Democrat nominee. And Kamala, not just with her being on the top of the ticket, but we've seen the trend continue to grow with women under the age of 55 and both their interest in the election, their determination to vote in the election, who they're choosing as opposed to just being undecided. When you give them an option on a Republican, versus Democrat generally, or the actual Trump versus Harris race. So what we're seeing overall is that while Kamala does have a slight lead on the ballot, is that Trump has also been picking up ballot share along this way. We're seeing fewer undecideds within this election, but
so she's picking it up from young women, right?
Exactly, and she's picking it up from women.
And where's he doing well?
Donald Trump has been doing even better with men over the age of 55, and so this gender gap that we're seeing is not necessarily even, because even when you go look at where Kamala has been picking up votes, it's significantly more with women under the age of 55 than over the age of 55, and 50 or 55 is a pretty good 50-50 break on if you're trying to divide the electorate in half by an age perspective.
Does she have more to get? Like, in other words, she's doing this podcast. She did this Call Her Daddy podcast all about abortion and sexual. I mean, like, is she just juicing this, saying I can get more out of this? I mean, like, why would you? Is that I'm trying to figure out what the strategy is. Is the media strategy that she's employing, I got to juice this because I know I'm not getting men and I got to get as many women, or is that stone got any more blood in it?
Well, if you think about elections as persuasion to turn out and not persuasion, then you can look at both candidates' media strategies, especially these kind of non-traditional mediums like podcasts, and see exactly what are they trying to accomplish. And her showing up on that Call Your Daddy podcast shows that she is trying to reach that younger demographic, specifically female voters. And I know the person who runs, I don't know her personally, but the person who runs that podcast mentioned that she also invited Donald Trump onto the podcast and that he declined, and that there's supposedly a balanced mix of partisanship who listen to that podcast. That's kind of hard to believe. And there's been no data shown to prove that. But you go look at Donald Trump, and what is he showing up on? He's showing up on Theo Vaughn. He's showing up on these podcasts.
Nelk Boys. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah.
It's younger men. I mean, he needs to go perform better with younger men, and she needs to increase the turnout of younger women. And
but both of these demographics are kind of unknown, right? I mean, you're going after aren't both of those rather low propensity type voters?
They tend to be low propensity, yes, which is why you see the age break shift between a midterm and a presidential election, because those younger voters are just a smaller share of midterm elections because they're not as likely to show up. But what's really interesting is that there are some states when you look at, because again, this is not a national election, there are some states where you're going to see a higher or equal turnout to 2020. And there are some states like Pennsylvania that at this point, we might actually see a slight decrease in turnout compared to 2020, where, 2020 was so much larger of a turnout than 2016.
But why? So why is that? Is that because of COVID? Is that because Biden was, quote, a favorite son of Scranton? Like what juiced it in 2020 that's not now?
Well, judges deciding that they made the law as opposed to followed and applied the law is one of the main reasons. Because if you go look at how could people vote in 2020 compared to now, is that judges were making all kinds of, they were just saying, well, that law doesn't apply because there's a pandemic. And it was so much easier to go grab a ballot somewhere. I mean, in Georgia, for example, they mailed out absentee ballot applications to everybody in the state. And I don't think there's a law that precludes against that. But that's not something they're going to do this time. And so you're likely going to see the absentee mail volume in Georgia, as an example, drop significantly because everybody was not handed an application to vote by mail.
Good call. Yeah, these are these little factors. Like when I do the Road to 270 every Wednesday, that like who's on the ballot? Is the Green Party on or not on? Are they mailing out? Like those things, when you're talking about tens of thousands of votes, like that's a huge nugget to keep in mind. So they also talk about Trump doing better with like Latino voters, Black voters. Where does that stand?
Well, looking at our poll that we'll release tomorrow, we've seen that generically Republicans have been doing better with Black voters over the last month, and a little bit not as well in improving their margins with Hispanic voters. I think some of that is a factor of advertising and who's being targeted. And it doesn't appear that the Harris campaign has made a massive play for Black voters as much as they've made it for Hispanic voters. And so this deluge of money is probably playing into that aspect somewhat. But I really do think if you look at why would a young non-white male vote, and it would be because their life has been decimated. Their opportunities have been taken away from them. There was a really good article, I think it was 2 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal, that looked at young men, specifically non-white young men, and how many of them were living at home now compared to historical numbers, how many of them didn't have a job. And so if Trump can tell that story and speak to a positive, optimistic future for them, I think you are going to see those younger non-white male voters specifically turn out in larger numbers than we've seen in the past. And looking at the polling data shows that should benefit Donald Trump.
Is the women issue where Kamala's doing well completely driven by abortion?
We definitely saw an uptick in abortion in the last 2 months, but really in the last 1 month as a top issue as inflation and economy have dropped. And there's a couple reasons for this. If you go watch the news, it's not being talked about nearly as much as it was 2 or 3 months ago. Even on partisan news channels, I'm not even talking about mainstream news. And then the other aspect is advertising. And we see this in a lot of our because we do hundreds of state legislative races across the country, which are in really important states like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan and other places that are essentially they're the battlegrounds of the battleground states. And as Democrats spend on the abortion message, just beating up Republican candidates, you can watch the top issue matrix change, and you see that inflation and economy start to come down, and you see the abortion issue start to tick up. And so it really is, they are spending so much money on it. And it really is sinking in with mainly these younger females.
Is there anything that, we talk a lot about October surprises and the hurricane in North Carolina, Georgia, that area, what's going on in Israel? Is there any issue that you think at this point that's not one of those three, the economy, immigration, or abortion, that could impact the race at this point?
We have seen national security rise as an issue. It's more so among older voters as opposed to younger voters. That issue rises in salience, but it's not necessarily changing who they're going to vote for. It just is more top of mind because they're consuming a whole lot more news, especially mainstream and cable news. But I think at this point, if you had asked me a year ago what black swan events might occur in this election, I might have called one of them, but not 5 of them. And to think that there's not going to be another one between now and the election, which is now less than a month away, is hard to believe. But then I also couch that with the fact that I think voters are just so exhausted of campaigning in general, and specifically this campaign, and how up and down and left and right and back and forth that it's been. That if an October surprise happens, voters might just be like, I thought something like that might happen anyways.
Right.
But I don't expect it to have as drastic of an impact as it might have had in, say, 2016.
So I'll go over this later for the viewers in terms of the specifics, but I see the blue wall states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, all trending in Trump's direction. Where do you agree with that assessment, or should I pause on getting too excited?
Well, Michigan to me is one of the most interesting states because there's been polls that have come out that historically have been a little bit more left leaning that are showing a Trump +1 margin right now in Michigan. And the U.S. Senate race there, if you look at kind of the tier 2 U.S. Senate pickup opportunities for Republicans, that has sort of risen to the top of those tier 2 opportunities. And Pennsylvania's challenging because it has 2 massive media markets and then a couple mid-sized media markets, and then about 10% of the state that's in small media markets, or it's in the New York or Washington, D.C. media market. And so it becomes very difficult to advertise at scale in a place like Pennsylvania, which is why I think we've seen less fluctuation there at both the presidential and the U.S. Senate ballot level. And so as I begin to look at the road to 270, I wouldn't have 3 weeks ago said that that Trump could win via Michigan and not have to win Pennsylvania. But it's beginning to look more like that. Wisconsin is one of those states that it actually has the worst voter file in the entire country. They don't ask age or birth date. And that is one of the most important data points you need to go match to other aspects of commercial and voter data. And so, I almost put Wisconsin in its own category, that it could look really good and we lose it, or it could look middling and we win it. But Michigan is, to me, the story of the next several weeks.
I've been saying this. I think Mike Rogers, that race there against Congresswoman Slotkin, is to me the sleeper race. I think Mike Rogers wins on election night. Brent Buchanan, I always appreciate your insight. Thanks for sharing these brand new Cygnal numbers with us.
Hey, great to be back.
All right, that was fascinating with Brent. I want to follow that up with Wes Donehue. He is the president of Push Digital. They're involved in a ton of states. Before I get to Wesley, though, I want to tell you about another great guy, Leo Grillo. Leo Grillo is the founder of Delta Rescue. You've heard me talk about him before. I've rescued 3 dogs. When I first talked to Leo, he was like, it's not a shelter, Sean. This is a no-kill sanctuary for life. When they come to Delta Rescue, what he has built is amazing. They get the nutritional care, the veterinarian care, whether they're abandoned, nutrition, malnutrition, whatever it is, they get it. And they can live the rest of their lives out at Delta. It is unbelievable. It started with one Doberman with Leo. And when you go to these videos at deltarescue.org, you'll see the evolution of Delta Rescue. It is unbelievable what Leo has been able to do. Just continues to grow. Horses, cats, dogs, birds, you name it. It's unreal what he has accomplished, but it only exists because of our donations. And so if you can go on deltarescue.org, take a look at what they've done, make a contribution, hopefully think about making it a recurring one. But then more importantly, go to the estate button up at the top there, click on it, download it, just take a look at it. Do me a favor, just do me that one favor. Go to deltarescue.org, hit the estate planning kit, take a look at it, think about it, pray on it, consider it, whether you can make that part of your estate as well. Thank you very much. Now, Wesley Donehue. Wesley Donehue, thanks for being with us again. Listen, I was just having this conversation with Brent Buchanan of Cygnal. He was explaining why Kamala Harris has gained a little because of young women in particular, and a lot of it, the abortion issue. She's doing a, quote, media blitz, which is ridiculous. The idea that that's what counts as a media blitz, a couple of podcasts, Howard Stern and The View. That being said, just put your agnostic consultant hat on. Considering where she's doing well, young women who really care about abortion, is it a bad idea to be just focusing on Call Her Daddy podcast, The View, etc., which is where you probably have a good audience of people receptive to this message?
I think it's a smart strategy, to be honest with you. Like when you look at the polls, at every poll that I'm seeing right now, and I'm working on a bunch of U.S. Senate races in swing states like Montana, Ohio, Wisconsin, and then I'm seeing polls in Pennsylvania and Michigan. The top issues are, cost of living, inflation, and immigration, really, and by far, like those two are dominating like 70%. So when you're wrong on the 2 top issues that people are most focused on, you have to go in and find these, more hyper niche audiences and messages, right? So I think it's very smart of her to go on Call Her Daddy and The View, because without that specific demographic, there is no path for her. So she has to do that. She has to shore up that. So really, she's got to shore up her base. I mean, I think the Call Her Daddy thing, by the way, is just insane. I haven't listened to Call Her Daddy in years, but that's a podcast that started, really teaching women how to give better BJs. And now Kamala Harris is going on that podcast. So it's wild, but it's got a huge following.
It does, but don't you think, I guess that's why I'm asking this, right? You, not to be crass, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
This is it's sort of like the Cosmo of podcasts. But it caters to young women. And again, I find it I don't, it's amazing to me that you get credit for going on a show that is basically sexual in nature, that I wouldn't call it empowering to women by any stretch of the imagination. But if the biggest issue you have, to your point, hey, I can't talk about the border and what I've done in immigration, I can't really talk about inflation, so why don't I go talk about what's in my wheelhouse? Okay. I just wonder how much you can juice that. How much blood can you get out of that stone, as they say, right? Because at some point you've got a massive gender gap already. And does this help you? There are people they call Kamala curious. Like people are saying, I don't really like Trump, but I'm curious about her. I don't think this helps you with them.
I think it's very important, because the cost of living issue is one that hits women incredibly hard, because women are the one out, buying groceries, and they're seeing, like in my household, my wife runs my home, right? So it's the females. That's true in a lot of households. the females are the ones that are seeing the daily cost of living impact the greatest. So how do you get them back? Like without them, she loses.
By the way, you know how this works, right? They go, they do the hard work, they compare. When my wife tells me to go to the store and say, get these 5 things, I don't question it. It's like, yes, ma'am, I got it. Right? We don't really, we're like, if it costs an extra $3, it's like, I was told to get it. I'm getting 100%. It. I don't need to get in trouble. They go back and they say, hey, I didn't get it because the cost of lemons went from like 22 cents to 55 cents a lemon. They're like, you can go get your own.
Yeah, look, I don't want to stereotype every woman, but that's how my household works, and that's how my wife works. Yeah. So
I get told, sorry, not this week. It costs too much now.
No, and you're 100% right. So my point is, I think the cost of living issue has hurt Democrats with females, so they have to go in and say, look, Republicans hate women. So to your question about how much juice do you get out of that, I think you get all the juice out of it, because without that juice, they lose. So they don't have a choice.
Okay. So what do Republicans do then? If Republicans know, I mean, you saw Tim Walz, by the way, on Fox News. What a disaster. I mean, Shannon Bream literally cornered him and said, this is the law that you signed in Minnesota. Here's what it did. And he pivoted back. Donald Trump wants to outlaw abortion and he wants a national registry. She was like, nope, that's not true. That's not true. And he was like, well, it could be. But they're willing to lie and to say anything about positions because that's all they got. So what do Republicans need to do?
Not get distracted, not take the bait. Like hyper-focus, message, discipline, cost of living, immigration, crime, and then also hyper-focusing on some of these woke issues that people are really upset about, like, boys and women's locker rooms and things of that nature. If we just have message discipline and don't let them bait us into the abortion argument, we're going to win because we're right on every issue right now. The problem is most of our candidates allow themselves, and I'm not talking about, and I know everybody's hyper-focused on presidential right now, but I'm also talking about U.S. Senate races, House races, because look, we could take back the Senate, we could lose the House, so these are important too. We have to force our candidates not to fall for the trap. Just don't let them control the narrative and the message, because if we do, then all we're going to ever talk about is abortion.
So I want to segue for a second because you got a top of mind for me now on the Senate stuff, right? You guys do a lot of work in Montana. I see that as a pickup. I think the Democrats see that as a pickup now. Tim Sheehy wins that race against John Tester. That puts Republicans in pole position, right? They get West Virginia. Yep. That's Joe Manchin's old seat. Republicans get even to that. And then once they win Montana, they've now got a 51-seat majority. And now it's, I think Ohio, to your point, becomes maybe 52. Right. And then I think here's what I believe. I believe that we actually win all 3 blue wall states. And I'm not just putting on sunglasses and saying, I believe the Republicans are going to win. I think the data backs us up, but you guys are doing work in Wisconsin.
We are.
We were just talking to Brent Buchanan about this. He said the voter file there sucks. There's no age. There's not a lot of stuff that really, so he said it's harder to poll there. What do you see in Wisconsin for both the president and the Senate race?
Wisconsin's always been hard to poll. And if you look back at the last 2 presidential races where, 4 years ago they had Trump down, 7, and he ended up losing by 0.5%. And 4 years before that, he was down 9 and ended up winning. So Wisconsin is notoriously hard to poll. So we're doing the Montana race, the Ohio race, the West Virginia race, all those races you just mentioned. But I'm spending almost every day in Wisconsin right now with Eric Hovde. I'm a senior advisor on that campaign. And I'm telling you right now, man, that race is winnable. And I think we're going to win it. All the polls have us down 2%. So if the polls have us down 2, we could be up 2. So I am very, very, very optimistic about Wisconsin.
Don't you like that? See, what I like isn't just the poll. I like the trend, right? So you look at all of these battleground states, and I'm just making this up, but you can tell me the real numbers. But Hovde was down 8, and then 6, and then 4, and then 2. And my point is, I'd rather be surfing with the wave that's coming into the shore than riding on the top and trying to hold it back. And I feel like in every one of those blue wall states, the Republicans are cresting with the wave, not trying to hold it back.
We have all the momentum right now in all of these states. And, the thing about Wisconsin in particularly is, Hovde had to spend, nearly $20 million of his own money, and there was no outside help coming in. But the Democrats put, tens of millions of dollars in there banging up Eric Hovde. And despite all that spending against him, he still closed the gap. Now, finally, you've got the NRSC, you've got SLF coming in and spending money against Tammy Baldwin. In 20 years, Tammy Baldwin has never, ever been beat up. Finally, she's being beat up. So if we had all that momentum without the outside help, now we have the outside help. I believe that we're probably about 1 point down right now. I bet we're probably going to be 1 point up in the next week to 2 weeks. I think you're going to see public polls saying that.
I was going to spend $20 million on my own race too, but then I realized I'm about $19.9 million short of that. So that's what prevented me from doing this. I want to talk about optics, though, on the flip side, though. Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania this weekend. I've seen a lot of his big rallies. I've seen a lot of events. That, to me, if you look at game changers in elections, right, it's in a battleground state, in a key area. The enthusiasm, and I'm not trying to make too much out of one event, but it was the news that came from that, the effects of that. I know Scott Presslin and a lot of people were registering people at that. Like, I think that because of the importance of Pennsylvania and the 19 electoral votes there, that rally could really shift momentum at a key time in a key state.
I tend to agree, but it's not just the rally. I am seeing a massive, massive ground game in Pennsylvania right now being funded by both the Trump campaign and some outside groups such as Elon Musk group, and obviously Elon was at that rally. But I think you're seeing the most sophisticated and intense ground game in the country, probably in history,
really?
in
So
Pennsylvania
here's the thing.
right now.
I am so fascinated that you said that.
Yeah.
Because every Republican that I bump into from the highest level says to me, do you feel confident in the ground game? And I get a lot of, I'm not getting that. But you feel confident.
I feel very good about Pennsylvania because I see, I can't go into too much detail because I'm working in some of these things too, but I'm seeing it in my daily work, how much effort and how much money is being spent in Pennsylvania. Also, by the way, Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin. I think the Republican Party has a very sophisticated ground game this year, but I think it's mostly, I would say it's more intense in Pennsylvania right now.
See, that's going to make a lot of people feel good because that's where I think the concern is can you translate this voter registration that's moved in the right direction? Can you translate this enthusiasm into a, absentee early vote effort? And that's going to make people feel really good that you're saying that because there was a lot of concern, I think, when the RNC and the campaign allowed these third parties to get involved. Would they do their job?
I definitely think they're doing their job, man. Again, I can't go into too much detail because some of it's stuff I'm working on. I'll just say I am very comfortable and confident with the ground game I'm seeing in swing states right now. More so than in past cycles. I'll just say that. In past cycles, I had intense worry. Now, for this cycle, I don't.
Great, though, is that, right, you have the experience and historical knowledge to say, hey, I might not have felt it before, I do now. That's what I think matters. You didn't just parachute in and say, hey, I like this. You can see, compare and contrast. I think that's critical.
I think Republicans in the past have had this tendency to just throw money on TV and hope it all kind of works out. I don't think that's happening this cycle. I think they're spending a lot on TV, a lot on digital, a lot on mail, and just a ton on ground game.
Well, that's good. This weekend I was watching, as I do all the time, and I always say that admit that I'm a recovering political TV watcher. I hate watching some of these shows, but I do it so that the audience can hear some of the issues that I think are important to come up. But it's to me, you watch Mike Johnson on This Week, right? George Stephanopoulos spending the entire interviews asking him whether or not Donald Trump won the election or not, or whether there was appropriate language used at the Butler rally. And Johnson's sitting there over and over again. Could you talk? He said, George, I'll talk about any issue you want, any issue, hurricanes, Israel, tax. And all you want to do is litigate the past. And then you see Tom Cotton on Meet the Press getting hammered by Kristen Welker, same issue. Over and over and over again, right? They don't want to talk about issues. I am at a crossroads about whether or not Republicans should keep appearing on these shows.
That's a damn good question, Sean. I can't say I watch them because when I'm home on the weekends, I'm with my kids. Last thing I want to do is watch this
Smart
shit.
move.
To be honest with you, I hate watching those shows, so I typically don't unless one of my clients is on there. So I did not see those two. But one of the biggest problems we have in the Republican Party, and the reason Kamala can go on this media blitz is that, and everybody knows this, the mainstream media is in the pocket of the Democrats, and it is crushing us. We just do not get a fair shake on any of these shows, especially the Sunday morning shows. I don't know how to tackle that. I think we're going to have to start going around the media more, relying on more podcasts, relying on more Joe Rogan type podcasts, which is also why you see Donald Trump going on more podcasts here this cycle, which I think is a very smart move. But we have got to figure out a long-term solution to this problem because we just do not get a fair shake and it's killing us.
I've said this before, and I'll just get off my soapbox in a second, but I think you are absolutely right, is that we need to start treating this like the alternative economy. If you go on their shows, you're giving them oxygen and legitimacy. And if we stop doing that and saying, you know what, I'm just not going to go on their shows, I'll go on Theo Vaughn and Nelk Boys and whatever, or Joe Rogan, that they won't come on our stuff, right? I mean, why do we? It's funny, the Dems will never come on conservative stuff, but we have to go on theirs. I think this is stupid. Here's the last question I have for you that I've been obsessed with that I'm going to ask all week with folks. There are two issues that I think are important that I think Republicans, frankly, either party could win on. One is the banning of cell phones in schools. The other one is this issue of big food, something that RFK and Tulsi and others have been pushing, Alex Clark, where it comes down to, can we actually get the government to protect us from, food dyes and chemicals that are in foods? I think either candidate who picks this up could actually do well.
I totally agree. I think like that cell phone issue is a very niche issue that most of us parents are really concerned about because it's tough because we don't let our kids get a lot of screen time, and then they go to school, all their friends have cell phones and they're playing Minecraft and all these games, and they come home and they're like, why can't I have this when all my friends have it? It's very hard for us to fight that. And like on the food thing, you're hitting a very something I'm very passionate about, right? Because you probably know I'm a health nut and I'm a 50-time marathoner, and I hyper focus on food and what I put into my body, and most Americans don't. And it's simply because of ignorance. They don't know that the food that they're buying from the grocery store isn't real food, and that it's processed, and that and it's creating obesity, it's creating disease, and we're literally have shorter we're going to have shorter lifespans now than we did just 10 years ago because of what big food is doing to us. And by the way, big pharma also. So we have got to, this doesn't happen in Europe. And like, I hate,
right.
But we don't want to become socialists where we're regulating everything. But at the same time, I will drink a Mexican Coke because it has real sugar in it that my body can burn off. But a regular Coke in America is high fructose corn sugar. Right. So we've got to do a better job of educating people what real food is. And we have to do a better job, cracking down on these companies that are literally killing Americans. So I agree with you.
Just, and again, we're running out of time, but I mean, don't you agree that if someone could champion
100%.
this, and like RFK was, I think there's an audience for it that says this isn't partisan to me. And I agree with you. It's not, it's just saying, hey, I want you to be healthy. I expected the government to be looking out for me. And then I look down and I go, oh my God, this dye is hurtful. And so I just think
I totally agree. Individuals have to look at the ingredients on what they're eating, and government has to do a better job. And yes, I agree. RFK has a niche issue that every campaign should pick up. If we don't, we're gonna kill Americans, and it's insane.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, all right, Wesley. I know you weren't feeling well today. I hope you feel better. Thank you for joining us, guys. As I said at the outset, just a quick reminder: we've got a big show tomorrow. Robert Cahaley is going to be with us. Road to 270 on Wednesday, plus that live episode Sunday night. So you're going to want to hit that notification button and subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.